SmallmouthCrush guys on location, Great American Outdoor Show. Going to be doing a seminar. Got some requests to actually film the whole seminar as is. Got Epic Eric with the camera.
Yo yo!
And been doing this like 3 times a day it seems for the last week now. So we're getting really good. But I can just imagine the people with like the booths next to us here. They're probably sick of the same old story.
Yeah. I'm from Wisconsin. Walleyes, Lake Champlain. Got it.
Anyways, so we're going to get up there, put on a good show today, and hopefully we get some good footage because Epic Eric is on the camera.
I'm right on.
Let's go.
Introducing the Drop Shot King, Travis Manson.
What a great crowd. This is awesome. I want to welcome you guys to the NRA Great American Outdoor Show. This is like day 25 for me, feels like, but man, there's a lot going on here, a lot to see. I don't know if you guys made it all the way around yet. I'm still working on it. I'm actually just down the road, 2600 in a little booth. Be talking fishing the rest of the day and tomorrow. Notice I got this camera guy over here who's trying to be funny. We're actually going to be putting this out on my YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush, so this will be an episode that we're going to prepare full seminar. And we're going to be talking about my favorite species of freshwater fish, and that's the smallmouth bass, specifically trophy smallmouth bass. It's one of my favorite game fish out there. I mean, I love all bass fishing, largemouth and whatnot, but I love those big smallies, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to break down a couple of the key patterns that I look for when I'm smallmouth fishing, 2 main patterns, and then we're going to talk about some of the different types of baits that I use on a regular basis. In fact, I got a couple bonus baits I have not shown the whole week, so you guys will be the first group to see that. So we're going to get up on the tank. We're going to talk a lot of it about drop shotting, which is one of my favorite techniques to use. I could talk an hour just about the specifics in the drop shotting, but we're going to kind of cover that fairly quickly because I want to show you guys a couple of finesse baits that I use, some hair jigs. We're going to throw a football type crawfish around and see if we can get some of these fish to bite, although major problem here, I do not see one smallmouth in the tank. So that's a problem. We might have to stop this seminar right now.
Largemouth Crush, Travis Manson.
So we're going to, when I'm done displaying the different baits that I use, I'm going to come down here. We're going to do some question and answer. If you guys have anything specific you want to talk about, then would be the time. And I'm also going to just hang out here afterwards for you guys as well. So let me introduce myself. You guys know who you're dealing with. My name's Travis Manson. I'm originally from Wisconsin. So I grew up fishing walleye, perch, bluegills. It was rare that we actually bass fished growing up. It's become a lot more popular in Wisconsin. It's a great place to bass fish. But growing up, you kind of do what your dad does and your grandparents, and we were all about walleyes. So at an early age, I started competing in walleye tournaments. And in 2006 or so, one of my main sponsors was Mercury Marine, and they said, "Hey Travis, we'd love to send you down to Lake Amistad to fish in the first ever Bassmaster Elite Series event." That's the one where Ish Monroe won. And I had no clue back then. This is dead serious. I did not know the difference between a Cinco or a brush hog. No clue. Didn't know anything about bass fishing. I called up a couple of my buddies. I wrote some rods, some reels, went to Bass Pro Shops, got a bunch of baits, trying to figure out what I'm going to need when I'm down here on Lake Amistad. So I get on the plane, I head down there. Now I'm hanging out with guys like Aaron Martin, Byron Velvick at the time, stayed at his house that week, practiced for the tournament. They kind of took me under their wing, showed me the ropes, and I fell in love with bass fishing that week. It was a blast. I did terrible in the event, but remember, I didn't know what I was doing at all. But I had a lot of fun, and I knew that what I wanted to become eventually was one of them, a Bassmaster Elite Series Pro. So when I got back home, I sold my bass boat, sold the walleye boat, bought a bass boat the next month, started learning. I mean, I had to give up planer boards and crawler harnesses, leeches, night crawlers, walleye divers, all that walleye stuff is done. Now I'm focused on bass fishing. And so it's expensive, right? It's expensive to get into the sport, but I was just consumed with it. Started competing locally in events, and luckily walleyes and smallmouth bass really relate especially in some of these deeper bodies of water, they relate to the same type of structure and the same type of feeding patterns. So the learning curve wasn't that bad. I did have to learn a lot about largemouth and shallow grass, flipping, punching mats, things like that. But eventually, in 2010, I said, you know what? I'm going to try to qualify for the Elite Series. So I started, I began fishing the Bassmaster Open. The first event was on Lake Champlain, and it was my first time fishing outside the state of Wisconsin besides Lake Amistad. And I get there, and it was very overwhelming because it's such a big body of water. But I remember looking out, it was kind of a weird side story here, but the first time I laid my eyes on the lake, I saw this offshore structure, and it was like 5 p.m., and my plan was to fish the next day. And I went, in my head, I was like, I got to go fish that area the next morning. I went to that spot and crushed them. Like, it was like surreal. Ended up actually going to that spot day one on the tournament, was leading the tournament with 22-some pounds, and had a really good finish on Champlain. At that time, I still had some pretty beat up equipment. In fact, I remember setting the hook on it was a big smallmouth, probably about 30, 40 feet of water on a buoy marker. And I set the hook, and my equipment was so bad that my anti-reverse was broke, and the spinning rod just started spinning backwards when I set the hook, and I was like the first person ever to get a bird's nest on a spinning rod, right? I can see that on a bait caster. That's how bad I was. Somehow I managed to get through that, and the next event was on Lake Erie, which was a smallmouth factory. Ended up putting some good smallies in the boat, and then the final event was on the Chesapeake Bay, not too far from here, and I ended up qualifying for the Bassmaster Elite Series that year, my first year trying, and I also just missed the Bassmaster Classic, which would have been awesome to be able to fish that back then. So right now, on tour, they're throwing me down in Florida. I was on the St. Johns River. Now I'm competing against guys like Mike Iaconelli, Skeet Reese, KVD, guys that have so much experience, and it was tough. My first 2 years on tour, it cost about $100,000 a year to compete professionally because of entry fees and expenses. I was trading commodities at the time prior to that, and ended up leaving that job to fish full time. But after 2 years and $100,000 a year, and still learning the game, I'm out on the streets. I don't like talking about this stuff, but it's kind of sad. I'm digging through the garbage, looking for, it was rough, Eric. I'm just kidding about that. But I needed to figure out what to do, so I called up a buddy that lives in the Chesapeake area, Chesapeake Bay. I said, I can't go back to a desk job. I've been fishing for the last 2 years. Obviously, I can't keep staying on tour. He said, hey man, no problem. Let's just come out here. We'll figure something out. We opened up a small non-fishing related business that helps support the habit now. And then I also opened up a bass fishing guide service where I guide full-time on the upper Chesapeake Bay, year-round, with prime time there being April, May, and June. And then I also guide for Trophy Smallmouth, which is what we're going to be talking about today, primarily in upstate New York, Lake Ontario, and the St. Lawrence River. Also, just recently, in the last year and a half, started a YouTube channel. I'm having a lot of great success and a lot of great fun with that. I try to upload 2 videos on a weekly basis. And then during the actual fishing season, I try to upload 3 videos. So if you guys haven't checked out the channel, I do a lot of in-depth breakdown on different baits. I have all my tournaments that I fish. I still fish a lot of regional and local events. And then all the practice and tournament videos are out there as well. I think what a lot of guys appreciate about the channel is that I try to explain everything. I don't hold anything back. So you can find a lot of these secret areas I fish if you watch my channel and learn about all the different baits, because I'm not sponsored by just one company. So I'm not picking on anybody, but if I was sponsored by, say, Strike King, which makes some great product, I would be up here in my Strike King clothing and talking about a Series 5 and a sexy dog and all that. And they are great, but I like a lot of different products, and I like to rotate a lot of different companies, and we're going to share a few of those baits that I use up there. So enough about me. I do encourage you guys to check out that channel when you do get some time. Let's talk fishing. Let's talk about trophy smallmouth fishing, and that really is determined by your body of water. When I mean trophy, for instance, let's say the Susquehanna River, which is local to here, man, you catch a 4.5, 5 pound smallmouth, that's a trophy fish on the river. It really is. When I'm up on Lake Ontario, a trophy smallmouth to me is going to be that 6, 6.5, 7 pound fish. Those are the fish that we're hunting on a regular basis. My largest smallmouth to date is just at 8 pounds, but we do get a handful of 7s every year. A bunch of 6s and 5s are pretty common up in that zone. It's a real special area. And keep in mind, when I am talking about this stuff, you guys are going to be able to apply this to the Susquehanna River and the local bodies here in Pennsylvania, Maryland, wherever you may be from. But one of my favorite techniques is shallow water sight fishing. Not necessarily when they're bedding, but when these big smallmouth are up shallow feeding. The reason why they're shallow is because they're aggressively feeding. They're aggressively looking for crayfish, alewives, perch, bait fish like that. And what I like to do is obviously you're going to need some clear water. So shallow to me is anywhere I'll catch fish in 2 feet of water out to 10 feet. I'll be able to see the fish with my eyes before I catch them. It's almost like hunting. That's what I love about it. I can see that big 5-6 pound smallmouth over there swimming, and it's my goal to put him in the boat. How I do that is going to dictate the conditions and the pressure that are on those fish. So if you fish a lot of the community holes per se up in the northern part of the country and even on the Susquehanna River, sometimes when you're hunting these fish and you're pitching right at them, they can scatter. They get smart. They know what's up. And so a lot of times you have to really predict the way that fish is moving. I like to cast the bait 10 to 15 feet away from that fish and then bring the bait towards him and kind of make him think he's ambushing that bait and don't let him know I'm around. But then there's other times I'm doing this technique where I have these big giant smallmouth right underneath the boat hanging out in the shade line and I can't get away from them. I have to literally put the trolling motor on high so I can get the boat away and actually make a cast to them. So it's a really exciting way to fish. I like to just pull out a lake map and I'm looking for anything that's going to be up in a shallow area near deep water. A lot of times you're going to find the bottom is very similar to this concrete. They got a lot of slab rock up north. You're going to find some veins, I call them, with some rock chunks in there. You're also going to be looking for grass patches, sand patches, any clear spots, and that's where these fish are going to be up and moving. And sometimes you can find a bunch of them shallow, but oftentimes it's just one fish here, one fish there type of deal. But a lot of times they're the biggest fish in that area. And so I throw a variety of baits at them, and there's a couple different techniques I like to use, but primarily I'm going to throw a drop shot, even in that shallow 2 foot of water. I know I get a lot of questions about that, and I'll go into detail after this seminar if you guys have questions specifically, because a lot of people think drop shot is just for deep water, and it certainly isn't the case for me when I'm targeting those shallow fish. What I like to do is I'll keep my eyes out. I like to have the perfect conditions. It's going to be high sun, dead calm, so I can see into the water. The right pair of polarized sunglasses is going to be important. I run 3 different lens colors. I run a color for sunrise, like early morning, cloudy days, also depending on the bottom color. So if it's a lighter bottom or a darker bottom, I'll have different shades like that. And I encourage you guys, take a look at sunglasses and kind of pick the right ones for your eyes, because everyone's eyes are different. And you want to make sure, if I was to say there's one all-around color, it would be like a copper or amber lens is what I use on a regular basis. But when I'm out there looking, searching for these fish, I'm also constantly throwing a bait. It's a specific bait. It's a 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce War Eagle spinner bait. It's going to be in a chartreuse blades for sunny days, or it's going to be all white blades for cloudy days. And all I'm going to do is cast as far as I can in any direction that the boat's traveling while I'm still scanning. And I'm just burning it just about a foot under the surface as fast as I could possibly reel. So I'm using a high gear ratio reel. And I'm just burning that spinnerbait in. And oftentimes, on a good day, you can get that fish to commit and grab that bait. It just pulls it right out of your hand. It's an awesome bite. Other times, though, you're going to have that fish is just going to follow that swim bait or that spinnerbait, 40, 50 yards. As it gets closer to the boat, you're going to actually run out of line, and then that fish will just kind of drift back down. I'm able to pick up a drop shot or a finesse type of bait, pitch over to them and catch them. This technique does work on the Susquehanna River. Of course, you got to have the right conditions. Last year wasn't the greatest because of all the rain. But one thing I found on the Susquehanna is those fish blend in so well to the bottom because of the rocks and the different structure that's down there, that even for a guy like me, who I think I'm pretty good at picking out a fish, it's tough on the river to do. But it does happen. It does come into play. It's a great way to fish. But I want to cover my next favorite approach, and that's going to be a deeper bite. That's going to be July, August, September, October, when these fish are going to get into 18 to 60 feet of water. That's when you're going to find the big schools of smallmouth. And this happens everywhere from Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, all the Great Lakes, Lake Champlain, Oneida Lake, and depth is going to vary based on the body of water. So for instance, where I fish the most, Lake Ontario, it's hard for me to catch a fish in over 40 feet of water. Where if I'm on Lake Erie, I'll definitely be looking looking in that 40 to 60 foot range. And all I do is I take a lake map and I'm going to look for underwater points, humps, ledges, islands, anything that's a little bit different, that's going to have some type of structure for those fish to hang out. They're going to be feeding on gobies. It's the number one bait fish that they choose to eat. The bottom is just littered with them. So I have a couple different tricks when I am fishing that with a drop shot specifically that I'll go through at the tank here. But all I'm going to do is idle around. I'm going to be idling around sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours until I run into a group of fish. So when I pick out these areas, eventually, after a summer or a couple trips up there, you can start getting waypoints, and eventually you're going to have 10 or 15 areas where then all I'll do is I'll go with my electronics, and I don't even pick up a rod. If you watch a lot of my videos, you'll see me just idling around. All of a sudden, I'll graph a fish, and I'm too lazy. I won't even get up on the deck of the boat. I'll just grab my rod, throw it over the side, and normally within 10 seconds, because these fish really aren't that pressured up there, and they're not the smartest smallmouth. They'll bite instantly, and it's awesome. But you can get on that big pod of fish, and you can stay on them all summer long and just follow them. If you catch a fish in a certain area, chances are they'll be back the following year, the next week. They might stay there all throughout the summer. But if you find an area where the fish are gone, hopefully you have a few other waypoints and you've done your homework that you can just go run individual spots until you come across those fish again. I find that having a little underwater camera is very efficient for me, because a lot of times on the Great Lakes and Lake Champlain, places like that, you're going to run into big schools of walleye. We had a phenomenon last year where I saw a lot of sheephead actually on Lake Ontario. That was due to a lot of heat this summer and different wind patterns that we had. And for some reason, my smallmouth that normally live in certain areas they were gone, and it was nothing but sheephead. And for a little while before I dropped the camera down, because I was just so used to going out there and catching these fish, I was so frustrated. I was trying every bait that I had. I could not get a bite. And I put the camera down, and, oh wow, there's hundreds of sheephead down here. No idea where those smallmouth went for me at the later part of the summer. I had to resort back to that shallow water pattern actually. But we can talk a little bit more in depth about the deep water pattern after I'm done. I want to get up here and talk about some different baits that I like to use on a regular basis. Drop shot for smallmouth and largemouth, probably more than anyone I know. It's just a confidence. It's a confidence technique for me. A lot of times I'm using goby imitating type of baits. So for instance, the bottom of Lake Ontario is just loaded with gobies. As soon as you drop your bait down, you're going to feel the gobies peck at it. So I like to run, this is about 10 inches, but I'll run all the way up to 2 feet, especially on the Great Lakes when I'm drop shying, to keep that bait above the crowd of other gobies that are down there. I think that's why it's one of the most effective techniques. I'll use 2 different rod setups. So when I'm making a cast to an area where I think there's fish, or if I'm sight fishing and I see a fish, I'm going to throw it on a 7-foot medium rod. This is a 3000 series reel. I use 5 or 10 pound braid on 6, 8 or 10 pound fluorocarbon leader. And all I'll do is I'll cast that out there. And why I use a medium is because often when I'm making a long cast, I'm going to have a pretty good hook set. So I gotta really have a good tip. You can see these fish are tearing up. Now unfortunately they make me take the hooks off, so we can't catch any of these fish today, although I did have a couple on the other day that weren't like the baits on the market. I like to use a Gajo Spirit Shad. But all I'm going to do is cast it out to an area. I'm going to shake it for a little bit, just pick up, feel the weight, let it drop. I'm not going to put a lot of action into it. We're going to pretend that these fish aren't tearing it up. If I don't have a bite, I'm going to reel in 5 or 10 feet again, especially in that clear water, drop it back down, and hopefully there's going to be a fish around that's going to snatch that bait up. Do this all day, that's fun. The other technique I was talking about when I'm out deep, so when I'm fishing deeper water, I'm going to use a 7-foot medium light rod, because oftentimes I'm setting the hook right by the boat. I'm just reeling straight up, so I want that rod to really fold over and get a good hook set, because you're not setting the hook like you would throwing a tube or a soft plastic. It's really just the types you're going to get that fish right at the top of their mouth. But when I'm out here looking at my graph in deep water, I'm just holding that rod just like this with my finger on the line, ready to drop down as soon as I see a fish appear on the graph. Keep in mind, depending on the direction of your boat, so a lot of times we're cruising along with the trolling motor, I'll see a fish, I'm actually going to be dropping back here by the motor or by the seat, because by the time that bait gets down there, that fish is going to be back here anyways. So for example, let's just pretend we're dropping back here, I see a fish, I just free spool it all the way to the bottom, let it fall, and normally within the first 10 seconds, that fish is going to bite out there. And all I do is just reel straight up into him. God, I almost had him. A couple other baits I want to talk about, and there's so much more, guys, on drop shotting. The material of the weight, the length of the leader, the different hooks, the different baits. I throw a lot of different worms, goby imitators, Berkeley gulp. Baits like that are really effective for me, so we can certainly answer any questions you have in more detail later on that. But I want to talk about this little guy here. This is a black Marabou Jig. The secret's been out on this guy for a couple years now, but it's extremely effective. You can take this bait right now on the Susquehanna River and tear them up in these colder temperatures for sure. This is a 16th, 1/8 ounce, 3/32, so real light. I'm going to throw this on a medium light, 7-foot, 5-pound braid, 6-pound fluorocarbon leader. I've gone down to 4 before. I just want distance. I want max distance when I'm making a cast. So you really want to make sure that if you're going to set up and use this bait, sometimes if you have some wind, you're going to want the wind to your back. You want to do whatever it takes to get that bait as far away from you as you can. Because oftentimes you're in clear water, and this is kind of a do-nothing bait. Because it's real simple. I'll cast that out. I'm going to point my rod tip down, and I'm going to reel it in. I'm not dragging it on the bottom. I'm not fishing it on the bottom at all. It's just a constant, slow retrieve with that hair jig. And the fish will just follow it, and they'll grab it. And monster smallmouth will tear this jig up. It's one of my favorite ways to fish because it's so effective, and it works great in cold water, 30, 40 degree water, but I use it year round. I'll throw it in 80 degree water, I'll throw it in the middle of August, and still put some good fish in the boat. So it's a real cool little bait. If you guys haven't used that before, you just want to keep in mind, the steady retrieve is what you're looking for with that bait. And you can see him just chasing it down there. Now that's a very effective bait, but I got a little modification that I use when it comes to the Ned rig. It's made by Zman, same type of plastic that the TRD bait, but this is called the TRD Crawz Z. The material will float up off the bottom. It looks extremely realistic, but this bait here is super finessey, and it's actually smaller than that little TRD, that Ned rig that you guys may have thrown in the past. And it's, again, that Ned rig works great still, but this little gem here, they designed the plastic, they designed the keeper and the weight system to work with this plastic, so it's real manageable. It fits perfectly with the bait, and I fish this just like you would a shaky head. So I'm going to cast it out to an area where I think there's fish. And I'm just going to shake it a little bit, dead stick it, don't touch it too much, and just wait for a bite. I'm sure I feel something going on down there. It's a real effective bait. This is a full-body crawfish imitator. It actually is pretty buoyant, so it will float up off the bottom, the claws will. They make a really cool little weight system in here. This is like a 3/8 ounce. They make a quarter, 3/8, ½ ounce jig system. Oh, there we go, camera guy. But it's also weedless. And I would not throw this on a spinning rod, but we don't have a bait caster up here. I would probably throw this on a 7-foot medium bait casting rod with 12-pound fluorocarbon leader. And all I'm going to do is cast it out. I'm going to work it just like you would a tube or a football jig. Same type of areas, but I'm going to make it look like it's a crayfish trying to get away. So I'm going to give it a couple. I'm getting tore up here. So I'm going to give it a couple little quick twitches and let it just kind of dead stick. I want it to look like a crayfish freaking out trying to get away from that bass. I'll try that one more time down here for you guys. It's a cool little bait. What I like about it, I mean, it really looks real. If I was a bass, I would definitely think that's a crayfish for sure. Full body crayfish imitator. A couple twitches make it scoot along the bottom, dead stick it. And you get aggressive with this too. I mean, crayfish don't just skitter along the bottom. They'll just move along. You can throw this in grass beds,
Straight drop,
in rocky areas, any areas like that. We getting it, Eric?
Straight drop, straight drop.
Then I want to show you guys one more bait. We'll turn that up. This is a Kitech finesse jig. If you guys haven't used this guy yet, he's very small bait. In fact,
Travis, is that a micro jig?
yes, it is. Yep. But I fish it a little bit differently. Typically, when you think of a jig, you're going to be dragging that jig on the bottom. However, same setup that I'm going to use with that hair jig. 7-foot medium light rod, light braid to a fluorocarbon leader. And all I'm going to do is take this jig here. It's real small, right? Real finessey. I'm going to cast out to the areas, and I'm actually going to be slowly reeling that in and swimming it. They're already tearing it up. Just like that hair, I'm just going to swim that along. And they just won't let go, apparently. Very effective. You can use this on the Susquehanna, clear body of water, anywhere where there's some visibility and those fish can see that bait moving in the water column. They're tearing this thing up. Just real slow. I have a hard time seeing out here, but I think they're following it, right? Pretty good. Man, I wish we could set the hook on these fish. Come on. All right, I'm going to come down and answer you guys any questions that you have. Sure, question was gulp baits. Yeah, I love them. Berkeley gulp, can't go wrong. In fact, I use other plastics besides gulp, of course, but I like to take the container that the gulp is in, and I'll put those plastics that I'm going to use for the day in that and let them marinate. And I really think that scent is pretty powerful when you're smallmouth fishing. Yes? So the most common bait to catch a bass, I would say it's got to be a Senko, 5-inch Senko. That's what I would go with. Yes.
What'd you think, man?
Good.
How'd that
awesome.
go, brother?
It's hot, but it was
Let's
awesome.
talk. You got hot up there. I was concerned about you, man.
Good?
Were you feeling wavy on the tank?
Yeah. Yes.
Dude, we got some great bass takes up there, man. They were crushing it.
Good.
Yeah, especially the Zman product, man. They wouldn't leave that finesse
really?
alone. The micro jig, yellow.
Killed it.
Oh my gosh. Kitech micro jig.
Well, let's get back to the booth.
Questions from the skeleton booth. With Travis any better? He was Travis's reaction to Travis Manson on the Hulk drop. Any better? Just cheese.
Same thing.
Yeah.
All I did was just talk. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm used to fishing for walleyes, but that's exactly how it goes.
Oh my God, we can't stand it. So much cheese from Wisconsin.
Lake
What's up?
Champlain,
Drop
man.
shot, whatever, Travis.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap this up. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Leave any likes and comments below. I know I'm talking super fast, but I'm ready to go home.
8 days later.
Crazy. Until next time,
We'll see you
on the water. Is that good?